behavior is trying to explain behavior. It is trying to understand why people behave in a certain way, and it is about trying to some extent, predict behavior. Prediction is, of course, very difficult, but the fact is that's part of how we think of it. The methodologies that are used by OB include lab studies, field experiments, survey, case design. And the fact is, the epistemology that we use is normative versus descriptive. We are not trying to tell people how the world should be. Our expectation is to describe what happens when something changes or what is happening in that entire thing. And I think we are mostly using empirical methods, while there are some level of theoretical arguments that are also there in OB. Okay. This is a busy slide. I'm going to show you two really busy slides. This is sort of the timeline of OB research, and the timeline doesn't end here, it goes on. It also summarizes some of the most fascinating research journeys or research peaks that OB has. I, of course, have a more bias towards micro OB. So a lot of work that you will see me citing is micro OB. I don't do macro OB research. So if you are a macro OB researcher, I also request you to read a little bit more on that domain. Here, by listening to this, you will at least get to understand what is the kind of pattern that OB research, especially the micro OB research, has followed. 1920s is when we can start mark of OB research, and it was with the Hawthorne experiments, which I'm sure all of the researchers here have read in some way or the other. And I think what they really said was that the determinant of a worker productivity was a complex mix of incentives, supervision, received group influences, and attitudes. Because if you remember, the Hawthorne experiment showed to us that even when people were working in a virtually dark room, they produced more or equal to those who were working in a well-lighted room, because they felt that the supervisors were actually paying attention to them. So in a way, Hawthorne experiments were very revolutionary, because they told us that as much as the physical environment matters, the mind, the person who thinks about the physical environment actually matters more. Yeah, so that was the Hawthorne study that they did. So from 1920 to 1954-55, there was some work that continued to happen in the OB field. 1954-55, there was almost like what shall we say, explosion in leadership studies. People started to look at the question of leadership. What is leadership? What is the influence of leadership? What is the nature and influence of leaders on groups? And so there was a lot of works that started happening in that area, followed very quickly by a very important phase of macro OB research in the following 5 or 6 years, where some of the most key books of OT were written. Organizational Man, Personality and Organization, which was of course a micro OB book. The Organizations, which is still a classic in OT, The Motivation to Work, etc. These became some of the classic works that got published in the mid 50s, and it sort of heralded the kind of work that was happening, that happened over the many years. In fact, even today, motivation remains like one of the most important research topics in OB. 1965 to 71, so mid 60s, there was a beginning of OB. Psychology also started to find its feet. Psychologists who got trained were now going into OB departments, or they were actually working in IO, industrial organization, and they started looking at things like culture, leadership, change. These were some of the topics they started looking at. And the 1965-71 was also an important era because AOM, is the Academy of Management, actually is accepted OB as a division, right? So here the OB division got formed. The 1973, the industrial organizational label got, was stabilized, and this was stabilized because American Psychological Association, which was until that time only looking at pure psychology subjects, actually applied the IO label. There was a 14th division of APA that was formed, which was on industrial organizational psychology. So this also established the relationship between psychology and OB in those years. Again, 1975 to 89, there was an explosion of journals that started to publish OB research. Several journals of eminence appeared, but you might also look at how recent our history is, right? We're still talking about 89, 90, when we are still talking about research in OB, some journals starting to appear, and then of course organizational culture, quality improvements in Japan, research that was looking at psychological contracts and so on and so forth started to appear in the 1980s. These also became seminal works, and it introduced newer topics into the OB research depending on what were some of the conversations that were happening in the industry. 1983 marked the competing value framework, which some of you might have used in some of your research, and that is what also happened in 1983. And here, but what you might want to look at is that there was less attention to organizational context, and there was a greater focus on individual level of analysis. And that is why it was important that we started to, so this was still, we were still in the micro OB phase until the 1983. If we create 2000, as our, as what it is, if you look in this area, there is growth in membership in IO psychology and OB. AOM actually had a large number of people who now started to become members. In fact, there was a 50% increase in membership in 2000. 2004 to 2008, new research areas like employee engagement, creativity, Grumman Sachs started to write about it, creativity, Amabile started to write about it, Anderson started to talk about it, new work started to come out. 2008, there was a foci in, again, industrial organization. People started using some of the research in selection, coaching, mentoring, and so on and so forth. HRM started to use some of the research in IO or OB. And 2010 to 11, newer research areas, goal setting, organizational justice, justice climate, leadership and multi-level analysis. Actually, it is only in 2010 that multi-level analysis started to actually take some root in OB. We said, no, let's not just look at individual, let's not just look at group, let us not just look at structure, organizational culture, let's look at all of these together, because that will help us explain better. And so if you see, 2013 was the year when multi-level studies started to take root, and 2015 to date, there is greater work on evidence-based management. Russo actually was one of the persons who talked about psychological contract. She also started to talk about, just like medicine uses evidence when they start to treat people, can management researchers also provide evidence that actually the industry can use to make decisions about hiring, selection, and so on and so forth. And it started to establish as a course curriculum, as a division. When Russo became the chair of the OB division of AOM, she actually made that a formal part. There is work on diversity and inclusion. There is renewed interest in teams, and I think the pandemic has definitely gotten people to start looking again at crisis, because we have faced crisis, and a lot of organizations have been caught napping and they don't know what we are talking about. So, in fact, there is. So, what I would say is that there is a change in the level of analysis. There is addition and expansion of topics being studied, and yet there is a failure to establish the IO or OB practices and competitive advantage. We still don't talk to other areas. We still talk about IO or OB as good to do things that we must work with, rather than just talk about what all remains. So why I say this is actually coming from a paper by Hackman, and a lot of work that I'm presenting, I'll give you the readings of it later, but these are all documented things. They're not just something that I'm talking about from the top of my head. In fact, there is this whole question about big O versus big B. So there is the OB, and this whole play on, are we looking at behavior, or are we looking at organizations, or are we looking at behavior within organizations? And let me just present a little bit of what this is. Here is the big B. Yeah, a large number of studies in the psychology, in the OB, are about behaviors that seem interesting. In fact, my own reading is a lot of Indian researchers are here. We do a lot of work on what we may see as essential, interesting behavior, and yet that interesting behavior does not add up to anything. Yeah, do private sector banks and public sector banks have greater motivation? It's interesting, but what does it add up to? I don't know, right? In fact, there is what the authors say as the core competency test. Is this a topic which OB has something specially to, it has unique insights, or are we bringing topics from psychology, sociology, marketing, and just applying it to OB and saying, here is something interesting for us to look at? It's easy research, but it is absolutely non-impactful research, because one, you are not talking about something that OB knows. You're talking about something that some other discipline is starting to talk about, and now you're applying. In fact, if you look at the entire process, if you look at the entire variable of regulatory fit and regulatory focus theory of Higgins, it was developed in psychology. Now, a lot of OB scholars are saying, can I apply it here? Can I apply it here? Can I look at it here? Can I look at it here? But they're not saying why this is important, or what does OB contribute to this. We have no clue about. Let's look at the second aspect of it, which is what a lot of research is. There is a contextualized base. So I say, okay, here is I want to look at motivation. Can I look at it in the context of the organization? And that is all I am doing. So I'm bringing the organization context. I'm saying morality. Okay, so let's look at the context of the concept of morality in the context of organization. We are saying, let us say, altruism. Let's look at altruism in the context of organization. Again, the problem is that it does not satisfy what is called the organizational centrality test. How much would we understand about organizations if we understood everything about, let us say, helping or about this? And in fact, the answer for most of them is no. We don't understand about organizations. We are basically taking another concept from somewhere else, applying it in the context of the organization and saying, voila. But that voila doesn't really add much to anything in this research. Because in fact we are copying, we are applying, but we are not necessarily doing anything more in that context. So the contextualized OB also doesn't seem like a good way or the best way to do research. The third is where we say we have a big O and a small b. We basically look at behavior that is central to the task of organizing. It points out centrality of organizing. So, how are teams formed? Why, which teams work? How does a manager and a team, talk to each other? How do these interactions impact actually behavior? These are some of the more important questions that possibly OB needs to look at, but because they are difficult to conduct and they are often very involved, we don't end up doing a lot of these research. In fact, a number of OB and HR researchers that I have interviewed for jobs in not only Ahmedabad but in other interviews, I find that they don't even understand the concept of how it applies to the industry. So I had one person who was talking about realistic job reviews and something about it in the organizational context. And I said, have you ever seen an RJP? And she has never ever seen an RJP. She has picked a concept, she has put two things together, something has worked out, something hasn't worked out, but it is not explaining anything in the organization. So what I'm saying is that while there are three kinds of research, and every research has a okay, like every research has some element of every part has some element of meaning. I think what I'm saying is that yes, you could do some big B research. Maybe you could do some small b in the context of the organization. But I think the most impact would come if you were to start thinking of the big O studies. Like what is central to organizing? What is central for an organization to understand about behavior of people so that we can then start to also consult and work with organizations and actually publish a lot of, also publish in good journals. So here is something that you might want to think of. Here is another way of thinking of OB research, the conceptual domains of OB research, and these are, and what we say is that OB is like a way of thinking, influenced very much by the existential philosophy. It is a system of technology, which is a neo-behaviorism. It is like, it is about behaviorism. And of course, it is a body of constructs, models, and factors, which is the entire ontology of operationalism. And I will take you through these very quickly so that you have some sense of it. So if you see, and if I remove this for you from here, you will see I'm talking about OB as a way of thinking. OB as a way of thinking includes a systematic study based on conceptualization of the object of study as non-random, systematic, and purposive. Orientation towards change as a desirable outcome. OB has a humanistic tone. It talks about bringing about positive change for people that it is involved in. OB will never talk about how to exploit people. OB has a positive tone about how to protect people, how to take care of people, how to empower people. Now, whether it finally does it or not, but it is not value free, it is value laden, and the value is towards actually improving lives of people. It is, of course, a little bit performance oriented. It has to be, because at the end of it, you have to talk about whether it impacts the performance of the organization, the person and the organization. Of course, we have many interesting places where we study how some of the things that we study in OB impact individual motivation or satisfaction, but sometimes it doesn't relate to the productivity of the organization. And I had a very interesting example of it. I was, many of you have possibly heard about how wonderful the culture in Taj hotels is. When the terrorist attack happened, there were employees of Taj who were willing to lay their lives and actually laid their lives to protect their customers. So here is an organization which has a beautiful culture. People are committed. There is all of that. But I was asked by the HR head of Taj Hotels 5 years later to say, all of this wonderful commitment, loyalty, and so on and so forth actually comes in the way of productivity of the hotel. So here is an interesting question for us to look at. While people are extremely motivated and committed, and they are willing to lay their lives when a crisis happens, on a day-to-day basis, neither are they trained nor are they willing to do what possibly requires for what a hotel requires them to do. So it's an interesting question for us to look at. Again, OB as a scientific method has all the norms of any science. We are skeptical. If you tell me this happens, I'm going to be skeptical and say, really, let me look at whether this happens or it doesn't happen. I exercise caution when I tell somebody that I think somebody who has high level of anxiety is not likely to make a good employee. I'm in fact making a very large statement. I don't make it just like that. I have to exercise caution. I have to report my research in such a way that there is a replication that is possible. And of course, I have to also knowledge only based on facts, not based on opinions, not based on what I think it should be, but I must say things that I have evidence for. And that is why evidence-based management is starting to hold root in some parts of the world. OB as a body of constructs includes a number of models and facts such as motivation, learning, group structure, leadership behavior, task design, interpersonal communication, org structure, interpersonal change, and conflict, relevant dependent variables, and so on and so forth. So that also is something that OB as a research also has. And the last of them, it is a system of technology. There are a lot of people who use OB research or talk about. So if you look at the OD and change literature, organizational diagnosis and change literature, it will talk about training leaders, designing tasks and organizations, evaluating performances, rewarding modeling behavior, technologies that are exploratory, unvalidated, and under constant evaluation. So, so these are some things that also happen when we look at it. However, I want to share with you three very, very fascinating studies which then lead us to a very important part of looking at OB research, and that is in fact about context. Yeah, that is the big, do we understand the context in which this is happening? So here is a study, and these are all not my studies, they're classic studies, they're reported elsewhere. I'm not the doer, I'm not the one who did these studies, but all of them would have Hackman as an author in these because this is from a paper that Hackman has talked about. So here is a study where, you know, nowadays I also said in the last 5 years there's a explosion of research on diversity and inclusion. These are some of the earlier studies that happened kind of, you know, were the beginning of this entire process. So where they said that most orchestras have male players, right? Orchestra, you know, there's a conductor and there are people who playing different kind of instruments, and they found that in most of them the number of players were actually men. And then they said, well, we must have diversity. Some orchestras actually inducted women into their orchestras. And what was interestingly found that the work motivation and satisfaction of members of the orchestra actually deteriorated as women increased. It just seems completely meaningless, but you know, it seems very strange that when more women entered the orchestra, in fact, the player satisfaction, the attitudes became poorer even of the present women orchestra players. So it was a question that was definitely, you know, you expected that as more women went down, if at all, if nothing, at least there would be no change. But here is a surprising finding that actually there was a change. Now what they did was, they were like, how do we explain this? And how do we explain it? So what they did was, they took it a little further and they said, let us look at the national gender culture and let us look at the orchestra gender culture of the country. So they were looking at 4 countries, 4 different nations, West Germany, East Germany, United Kingdom and United States, right? United States has a higher national gender. Even though the pay gap in US is very high among men and women, but yet you will find a lot of women in the workplace. There are lots of women in the workplace. So you had high gender culture in the US. You had actually a high gender culture in East Germany. This is Berlin, this side of Berlin. And they found, while on the other hand, they found in the West Germany, which was the non-communist part, actually they had lower gender culture, and United Kingdom also has a lower gender culture. Women don't enter the workforce, you know, past vestige of the Victorian times and so on and so forth. On the other hand, the orchestra gender culture is interesting because in UK, just by chance or because of whatever it is, actually a lot of women are part of orchestras anyway. Yeah. On the other hand, in East Germany, actually there are very few women in the orchestras. In US also, they had high participation of women in orchestras, especially regional orchestras. So now we have a categorization of how different cultures are, the environmental culture is, and also the orchestra culture is. And they found that when they looked at that in fact in those countries where the orchestra culture was high for women, the satisfaction was very high when more women were brought in. But where the orchestra culture was not women and the national culture was also not women, which is West Germany, actually introducing women led to a decrease in satisfaction. When you did not use this categorization and you just put all the data together, then you came up with a lowering of satisfaction. But when you broke up the data, when you looked at the environmental culture and the industry culture, which are 2 levels up and down from the actual variable that you're looking at, you start to actually see different aspects of it. So what they said is that the stress that comes about of gender recomposition may in fact be reduced by making changes both within the orchestra and the environmental culture. You can't simply make change in one and hope that the change will happen in the other, right? So this is something that you could have never found if you had only looked at attitude or satisfaction levels of people joining the orchestra. You would have just said, you know, it's bad for the orchestra to have women, so let's not have women in the orchestra, because in fact the levels are going down. It would have been a wrong application of your study, but that is exactly what you would have studied if you had not looked at both of these variables. Let me show you one more interesting example. This is a study of airline cockpit crews. Yeah. So, you know, the pilots and the air host and air hostesses, and they were looking at satisfaction of the pilot and the air host in this entire process. And again, what they did was they looked at two structural features: the design of the flying task and the design of the crew itself. And in fact, they also looked at at 7 different kind of airlines. 3 US airlines, one doing really well, one not doing so well, one struggling, 3 European airlines, 1 Asian airline. So airlines which had different country cultures, they all flew they flew different kinds of airplanes, from DC-9 to the Boeing 767, and in different airlines, and they were looking at, okay, what will define? Is it the kind of plane? Is it the kind of airline? Is it the health of the airline that will actually define the effectiveness of the teams within the plane? And actually what they found was there was no difference in satisfaction or performance of the crew across airlines. It didn't matter whether you flew this airline or that plane, the satisfaction was found to be, or even the performance was found to be not so different. So again, you've spent all this money collecting data, no difference found. You would either have to throw away the study or actually not be, or just say it doesn't matter. Don't do anything for your planes. Don't do anything for your crews. People are generally satisfied. Yeah, it doesn't matter. However, they had collected more data, and so what they found was that there was between airline variability depending on in the pilots. Yeah, not in the crew, but in the pilots, depending on if the pilots had enough resources, there was clarity of performance objectives, there was recognition and reinforcement. Actually 23% variability could be explained by this. Again, no rocket science, because better airlines have more satisfied pilots. That's all they found, right? If you were a healthier airline, if you were making money, you could spend a lot more on your pilots and the pilots were happy. Another interesting thing was that they found was that crew satisfaction, irrespective of the leadership style, actually did not matter. Now, this is interesting. Now, the pilot could be a dictator, the pilot could be a very nice human being, they could be pleasant, they could be unpleasant. It didn't seem to make any difference on the satisfaction of the crew. Now, what they found, again, as they started to look at their data, is that in fact the plane is a very closed environment. You have no possibility of making any impact on the satisfaction of the crew, because the context is extremely standardized. Yeah, you have one small cockpit, you have this many crew, everybody has to do this. So in fact, crew satisfaction doesn't get impacted by leadership style. Don't invest in leadership style of the pilot, but rather than that, make sure that you give resources to people to be able to do their work well, both material and organizational resources to do your work well. And that is all that might actually help you in this entire. Right? So that was another interesting finding when you start looking at the entire data, look at context, look at everything. This one is also very interesting. These are hospital patient care teams. This is a study done by Amy Edmondson at Harvard Business School. And they investigated the causes of medication errors in hospitals, and they looked at nurses, physicians, pharmacists, clerical and medical aides, and they looked at units that were well structured, and the interesting study was that those units that were well structured actually made more errors. Again, completely counterintuitive. Why would you have units that are well structured actually make more mistakes? Chaotic units, less structured units had less mistakes, and this one had more mistakes. Wow. Yeah, this is absolutely against all evidence and all advice that you possibly give to any hospital. Please structure yourself well. In fact, if you are more structured, you're likely to have more errors. Bad advice then, right? So what did they look at? They further looked at, they observed these teams. Yeah, they sat and looked at how these teams worked. And what they found was that the social climate, yeah, and the norms around what happened when a mistake was made was the important criteria. And if you look at, the more open the climate is, the number of errors that are detected are higher. Higher structure sometimes mean that when an error happens, it is hidden. It is not discussed. It is not shared. And so closed environments where errors are not discussed, not shared, not talked about are the ones that there is going to be greater number of errors. There is another thing, that unless you look at the entire context, you will never be able to actually study OB, right? So here's something for you to look at. So in fact, what I'm saying is that in OB, if you don't look at context, you're missing a very, very important piece. In the definition of context in Latin, it meant knitting together, right? You knit everything together to make a whole. In fact, it is what Capelli and Scherer, Mode and Sutton, Johns, there are 3 people who have written extensively about context, and each one of them is defined as phenomena that surround. These are situational opportunities and constraints that affect the occurrence and meaning of organizational behavior, as well as functional relationship between variables. So again, you can't simply look at what the variables mean without in fact looking at in the context in which these variables happen. So effects of the context can both be subtle and powerful. Sometimes the main effect or interactions are what get affected, and as a researcher, you need to look at all of them. I don't know how much more time I have, so maybe I should stop. I should not go into the detail here, but here is what it happens. When you don't use, what the context does in terms of our research is sometimes it restricts the range of variables that we can consider. It affects the base rate, right? So if already people are being absent and you're trying to study absenteeism, then the context will tell you why people are absent in this industry, or why there is so much of attrition in the industry, and you're not addressing it as if all attrition is bad. It sometimes reverses the causal direction. I think A will cause B, but in fact context will lead for B to cause A. That can happen. Or sometimes it can reverse a sign. I think A will be positively correlated with B. In fact, context can lead me to A being negatively correlated with B. And that we did a study very recently where we looked at regulatory focus, and in most research they say that if you have a terrible environment, you will have prevention focus. We didn't find that in India. And when in the industry that we were looking at, when they went and spoke to some of those employees, they said, we understand the environment is bad. I need to get out from here. So I'm working very hard to learn new skills, to get a good recommendation and get out from here. So everywhere else, it leads to some people actually giving up and just trying to make fewer mistakes. in the context of this industry in India, what we found was that a bad environment led people to become even more promotion focused, right? So it changed the direction of this entire thing. And if we hadn't understood the context, we would have just said either it's an error or something like that. We may not have a linear effect, we might have a curvilinear effect. Context would help us look at it. There are tips in precarious relationships, and I'll not talk about it. And it can, of course, threaten the validity. That is, in fact, it can make my findings being wrong rather than right in this entire context. So that is why we need to study context. And context is, in fact, who, where, when, why, and what. Yeah. So who are we studying? The occupation. Where are we studying? Where the location? A rural location might have a different aspect than an urban location. A city might have a different aspect than a two-tier city. When was it studied? Right? Something studied at the onset of pandemic would have a very different finding than something that was studied in December 2019 when the pandemic was not there. The why of the study, and of course, what are we studying? Task, social, physical. So this is a very simple way of thinking about context: who, what, where, why, and when. Yeah, and it's important that you look at all of them. So the implications for context, and this will be in my last two slides, the implications for context is that you do cross-level, you don't study just one level, and you do comparative research. If you study airlines, you also study hospitals, or you study cockpits and so on and so forth, then you get to understand it. Also, you study the process. You don't study just the outcome, because in OB, the process matters. People's belief in how they work at it, it matters. Study events, right? Like the pandemic is an event. This is a great time to do a lot of studies on what happens when people are in crisis, how people get together, does helping get affected when people are in crisis. It's a great context to start studying. And of course, don't just stay with quantitative data like in our regulatory focus study. Only when we started to speak to people that we actually got insights into why our sign had changed, why our entire thing had changed. It also impacts our measurement and analysis. Rather than using one kind of measure, use multiple kinds of measures, field measures, observational measures, self-report measures, and so on and so forth. And also make sure that you have reported all the omnibus variables, because that is what really helps us to say, okay, this works here. Let me see if it will also work in another context. But if I don't know the context, then the study will not be valuable for me. Okay, so what might our answer be? And maybe I will not talk about it. My concluding thoughts are that I think we need to think about where does our study fit in. What are the definitions we are using? I was just reading an annual review of psychology paper yesterday, annual review of organizational psychology paper yesterday on interpersonal power. Yeah, and we still are having definitional issues on interpersonal power in 2017. Right, so this is a 2017 paper. We still don't have definitions of what is leadership, motivation. Some of these things we still don't have. We are a constantly evolving discipline. Can we contribute to its evolving by bringing in the absolutely fascinating context that India provides to us? So we focus on context and on its importance. We look at multi-level analysis, what I have just been saying. And of course, the reason that I spend all the time preparing this presentation is I would like to see at this age of my career more meaningful research coming out of India, and we should study phenomena, not variables. Not because, two variables are interesting or my advisor has been looking at it, or, they're just available, therefore I study them. But I think we need to start studying phenomena. Thank you very much. So I will stop here. from which I have taken some of the ideas, and thank you.